let me do some quick housekeeping before we get rolling here with Brooke and Ricus. So what is up next is our first ever sponsored athlete is Gideon Kotkowski. So Gideon is riding in the longest and toughest horse race in the world. It's called the Mongol Derby. It's a 10-day race, and he is going to try to do something that no one's ever done before, which number one, he's going to try to win the race, but number two, he's going to try to run the last leg of the race riding bareback, which is crazy. So we're going to be able to follow him, but he is going to be in his sponsored, he just sent me the uniforms yesterday, his sponsored jerseys as he rides his horse for 10 days across Mongolia. So we're going to give you guys the tracker so that you can track his progress, and it's going to be a blast. So I appreciate everybody supporting Gideon. Our next meetup is the US Open. So we had a great time with Brandy Chastain in California, but up next is the US Open. We're going to be there August 30th. And then lastly, I just wanted to thank everybody. Your support for Outlier Magazine has been unbelievable. So we are 2 issues in, and we have 22,000 subscribers. So thank you guys all for your support. It is fun to highlight and celebrate outliers through the magazine. So I appreciate you guys. So for anyone who's new to a Legend series, the way that it works is we do about a 30-minute fireside chat. So that's me and Brooke and Ricus chopping it up for 30 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for live Q&A. If you have a question for Brooke or Ricus, just put in the chat that you've got a question. You don't have to write your question out. Kathy will let me know, and I'll tee you up, and you can ask them directly. But this is long, long overdue. You talk about a power couple. Ricus and Brooke are off the charts. So Ricus is a community maker. He's an entrepreneur. He's an executive. He's the founder of Maker, which is a mining company. He started as a coal miner. He's the former CEO of Treveli Mining. He's a podcast host, and on and on. Brooke is, what is Brooke not? I don't know. So I have known Brooke. I had to look this up today. I've known Brooke for 10 years. 10 years. Yes. It's crazy. So she's a Harvard grad, former model, pageant winner. She's an advisor to success. She's worked with Tony Robbins. She's worked with Simon Sinek. She's worked with Grant Cardone. She's done everything. They currently live on 3 different continents, so split their time between Vancouver, Cape Town, South Africa, and Western Australia. And now they're living in Zambia. So I am super, super excited to have this conversation. And before we jump into it with them, Kathy, get us started. Mike Perlow, thank you for the introduction. Brooke, Ricus, what do you guys think?
It was
Oh,
great.
that is funny.
I love to be amongst some of those names. It makes me feel a little bit extra special today.
You guys are spectacular. So I'm so excited. So they are coming to us today from Zambia. Let's start. What are you guys doing in Zambia? What got you moving there?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe I'll just start by saying because we're in Zambia, I think I need to preface every conversation by just inoculating the fact that power is an issue in Africa. So if there's a breakdown, we will join as soon as we possibly can. Um, but I mean, our life has been in and out of Zambia for the last year, to be honest with you. And we launched a company. Actually, Ricus founded the company called Maker Resources, and that takes his passion for responsible, ethical mining, responsible sourcing, and it marries mine. We're married, so that works out really well with which is really around community making and marketing. So, when you think about your life and your partnership and building something, creating something that makes a profound difference in the world together. That's what we wanted to do. So we married our two passions and loves for things and we created a company that we think is really going to ultimately shift the industry of mining at large.
Yeah, that's very true. And so I'm a trained mining engineer. So I've been in mining for more than 30 years, and I'm in Zambia at the moment building copper mines. So and if copper is one of those critical metals that the world absolutely needs, especially as we want to decarbonize our economies around the world. We need copper. And the thing with Maker, and this is where what Brooke was pointing to, it's a company, a mining service company in service of small scale and artisanal miners. So if you think of, I don't know if you know, but in small scale and artisanal mining, there's got about 90% of the world's workforce works for small scale and artisanal mines.
Mhm.
So all the big mines you see out there, the big ones you see on the LSE and on the TSX and these regis or listed companies, they only have 10% of the people that do mining in the world that work for them. The other 90% work for small scale and artisanal mining. So, and the reality for those 90% of people is that they do not have access to capital. They do not have access to good skills, and they really struggle. They've been given a raw deal when it comes to, the ability to build mines that in a sustainable way. So I saw this a couple of years ago because I was running a large scale mining company, and I spent quite a bit of time in the community. And honestly, so I say this very openly. I back then when I ran big mining companies, I looked at small scale and artisanal miners as a problem. So most of them, they will say, "Oh, we don't really want to get involved," because I don't know, when I say the word artisanal and small scale mining, what your first reactions are, but I can tell you what most people tell me. It is illegal. It's environmentally insensitive.
Child
It's
labor.
child labor, red cobalt, those, blood diamonds. All those things come to people's minds as, it's a bad thing. And honestly, that's how I felt. I was running a big mine company, and I did not engage with small scale miners or artisanal miners at all, because then you have to do something about it. And then I spent quite a bit of time in Burkina Faso, at one stage, and I had lots of time to go out into communities, and I started spending time with these communities and with these small scale miners, and I was absolutely blown away by the passion they have, the skill they have in finding resources that some others can't find, and also became very, very clear on the need that is out there. So you think, so I've been in mining for 30 years. I've got degrees. I've got all this stuff. I've worked in top end of mining companies. For me, it is super hard to find funding to build a small scale mine. So imagine if you're a Zambian national that doesn't have a degree in mining, that doesn't have access to capital, doesn't have contacts that he can pick up a phone and get funding. How difficult will it be for that person to get funding so they can build a mine? Because a mine is a capital intensive, long dated thing. It's not, it doesn't take a little bit of money. It takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of money up front. And then you've got to wait quite a long time to pay that money back. Now, what we're doing is, and so we're in service of small scale and artisanal miners. So we go out and we find ways to support them to build their mines in a responsible and effective way. And the beautiful thing is we were able to convince a company, a large-scale mining company called Jubilee Metals, to allow us to do that for them for the copper business. And that's why we're out here. We're building these copper mines and we give them access to refining capacity. And you'll see if you follow us on LinkedIn, there's some really cool videos of how we're taking some of these mines that are basically holes in the ground, that people have mined themselves. I joke when I say this, but they mine themselves into a hole that then fills up with water, and they're all underwater in terms of finances. And we help them turn it around and turn it into a business where they still own a large portion of that, and they can then go and stay get some cash flow going, and the mine is run effectively. But I think the key thing that we're doing differently, and this is where Brooke comes in, is that we are taking the communities with us from day one. So this is not. So most mining companies would spend, a couple of years in building the mine, getting it to profitability, and then spend some corporate responsibility money into the communities. I don't see it as corporate responsibility. I don't see it as a license to operate. To me, it's a privilege to operate in that community. And therefore, we've got to, from day one, make them realize that we are the best thing that's ever happened to them. And so, and you'll find so a lot of these smaller scale mines that we look after are in very rural parts of the world. And those communities have never really had anything, like no support. So we were at a school that's 2 kilometers from the one mine we're building at the moment, doesn't have running water, doesn't have
they've got and I know that we're dragging this question out, but I think ultimately it's the places that we operate are very rural, and you'll see that they have access to no basic needs or human rights accesses that we would normally have, from water to sanitation to proper education to shoes and clothing, and so our mission is to address those very systemic issues up front, and then we start to build capacity inside of the communities, but from day one. And they're involved in the decision making from day one. They're involved in the planning, because it's so easy to provide aid, to provide funding, to partner with nonprofit organizations and NGOs. But unfortunately, it's just not very sustainable. So we're addressing it in a very systemic and sustainable manner. And I think one thing maybe to say, because Ricus always speaks very technically into a lot of the mining stuff, so you'll see his passion for that. But one of the things that I've learned is why everybody should care on this call, even if they're not involved in mining, is if you're wearing a piece of jewelry, or if you're staring at a computer screen or a laptop or a phone, then you are a direct consumer of it. So without mining, those things wouldn't be here. And that's why we're all a part of what we're doing.
And that really perfect segue, because that was going to be my first question. It's interesting from an outside perspective looking in. If you were outside of the Outlier Project, we have 750 members in 34 countries, and I would probably say we have 0 members that are in mining. So we'd be like, why in the world are we doing this? I think it's because we have a hunger and a natural curiosity to learn. And then from the most probably obscure places is where we pull great ideas into our own lives and our businesses. So we had recently had Shannon Elizabeth, who's probably better known as the actress in American Pie and Scary Movie and Love Actually and all that. Her and her husband Simon, who live in South Africa, and now she spends all her time as a conservationist. We had them on, and it was interesting because you'd think, well, conservationism, like, I'm not really sure what does that mean to everyone here, but they did a remarkable job of talking about how the rhino horn trade is actually tied to terrorism. And you started to get into it in terms of the consumer products that we use. But I think the question is really, most of the people on the call here are from North America, and it's why should people care about what's going on in mining in Zimbabwe or Zambia or Cape Town or wherever the case may be?
Yeah, It's interesting because when we were, I mean, Maker's been around for about 3 years, but it has been something that's, as you know, when you're building a company, you're taking on contracts and you are bringing in multiple revenue streams because that is how you have to survive, you know. But when we were really starting to build lots of momentum around Maker, I received a phone call from Vogue, and they asked me if I would be interested and talking to the editor in chief, and we all we all know who she is. So I remember getting like all dolled up, and this is big. I mean, I've been reading Vogue forever, so to be able to sit in front of Anna Wintour on the other side of the screen was such a honor to me. And I was thinking it was going to be more so around the celebrities I'd been working with to build their brands. And to my surprise, the focus was really around the luxury jewelry sector and the need to responsibly source where our metals are coming from that are inside of our jewelry. So gold and diamonds and gemstones, and to change the narrative, because I think the retail sector at large has they've made lots of strides in responsible sourcing and ethical practices, but the jewelry sector is a bit far behind compared to the retail sector at large. And so that is really what engaged me with Anna Wintour. I became part of the Vogue 100 exclusive group. So I sat down with lots of the sustainability editors across all of the different Vogues around the world. And we saw that there was this profound need to bridge mining, so we call it mine, not just to market, but to Main Street. So the Main Street consumer is the you and everybody on this call today. Because at the end of the day, mining is demanded by all of us. And I think so often we sometimes know it because of Blood Diamond, but it is truly the roads that we drive on. It's the cars that we drive. It's the batteries in our phone. It's the computer screens. It's the jewelry that we wear. All of it depends on mining. And I think, you know, going back to jewelry, one of the things that I've had a lot of interesting conversations around more recently is lab grown diamonds. And, you know, mining has a big carbon footprint, but so does lab grown diamonds. And oftentimes they're not reporting on it because the machines to make lab grown diamonds has also a very substantial carbon footprint. And we're also employing a significant number of people at the end of the day. It's just how can we do so in such a responsible way? So that's my short answer of mine to Main Street. And obviously Ricus can speak into the more technical end of it.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, I'm very passionate, as Brooke is, on climate change. You know, so, and we have to do something dramatically on climate change as a society, as a world. And the reality is, if we don't do more mining, we won't be able to do it. And I know that sounds like not what most people want to hear, but the reality is we need about double the amount of copper to be able to decarbonize our energy sectors around the world. So, and to do that,
Why is that, Ricus?
because we're going to go to electric cars, for example, and electric cars got up to 5 times more copper in than a normal car. Now, if you want to electrify the grids, you've got to get copper cables in. So if you want to build the more wind farms, you need a lot more stainless steel. So all of these are things that we have to transition. So we're taking away a way of doing things. So taking away fossil fuel internal combustion engines, replacing with batteries and electric cars means that we need a lot more copper, nickel, cobalt. And that needs to be either, you can't produce it, you can't make it. So it's got to be mined to be able to be put into these devices that we have. So, you know, so from a copper mining perspective, we need double the amount of copper that we produce today in 20 years to be able to decarbonize our different economies around the world. Now, that's a massive challenge. And a big portion of that will actually come from recycling, and it should, you know, and I think we push extremely hard to get as much recycling done as possible, but it's only a small portion. You can only recycle so much because a lot of, for example, copper is already stuck in infrastructure that you cannot recycle. You can't take down all the transformers and the buildings and recycle the copper in them. So you've got to produce new copper. And I think that's a challenge for everyone who wants to think about, you know, and want to say stuff about, you know, we need to decarbonize this. You cannot just, you know, take yourself away from mining. Now that, and this is where we come in again, we want to find ways of doing mining in a way that it's so responsible that with the lowest possible carbon footprint and the lowest possible impact on communities and the environment where we mine. So that whatever, for example, the mines that we build, they will have maybe a 10 to 15 year mine life, and then the copper is mined out. But what we do is from day one, we build a longer term economy. So for example, the housing that we build around the mine is built in a way that at the end of the mine life, it can be turned into a game lodge, so that the community can then own a game lodge so that they can do responsible ecotourism after the mine is complete. Because we finish mines, we close them up and we replant, and you can't see there was a mine. That's what we need to do. We need a lot more of that, because we need a lot more metal to be able to transition our planet to a much more carbon sensitive one.
So how, as we as individuals, how, like, I don't know what goes into this. I don't know whether Apple is being responsible or irresponsible. How do we educate ourselves? It seems daunting to try to figure out. I think we want to do the right thing. We want to support companies that are doing the right thing. But how, as individuals, how do we get that education?
That is such a good question, because the reality is your phone that you lifted there, the battery in it's got cobalt in it, and it's got nickel in it, and it's got copper in it. The phone, and so there's all the critical metals that we talk about, and you'll hear the term critical metals being used a lot more around the world now, because it's going to become so important to be able to get responsibly sourced critical metals for the future. So this is going to become and it is already becoming a big talk topic. Reality is people do not know, and this is Brooke's point about Main Street. We all consumers. I'm a consumer of critical metals every single day, but people don't know. And I think part of what we are making people aware of is that you can play a role. You can say that, I want to know if Apple is actually being responsible and where they source their cobalt from, because they do have cobalt in their batteries. Tesla, and so luckily, because I've been in this field for example, Tesla, BMW are reaching out to miners like us to say, can we buy your copper? Can we buy your cobalt? Because what we also do at our mines is, you might not know, but we actually track and trace every single ton of product that we make. We track it from the moment we take it out of the ground all the way through to the refining process to the end product. So, and that's done on blockchain. So you can't tamper with that. So companies and I can talk for the ones that have spoken to us, like a Tesla and BMW, Volvo, have spoken to us about their willingness to buy metal directly from us, so that they can say that it's been sourced responsibly. But it also takes the consumer on the other side to say, I really need to know where this stuff's coming from. I want to understand that it's being done the right way. Because I can tell you also very, very clearly that I'm right next to the DRC here, and a lot of things are done very badly. And not just in the DRC, but in a whole bunch of other countries around the world, things are being sourced in a very bad way. Nickel being mined in Indonesia is a disaster, absolute disaster, the way that it impacts the communities and the environment. So these things are happening, but people are not really, I don't think people are aware of it. So and therefore, it's like if you don't know, you can't say, and you can't demand. So I think it's really important that we find ways to talk about this more and more and more, and make more people aware.
We recently had Michael Sheldrick last week, who's the founder of Global Citizen, on, and their goal is, amongst other things, climate change and ending extreme poverty. And he had an interesting take. He said it's not about awareness, it's about action. And I thought that was interesting. And I was wondering what your take is on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what brought us to Zambia, is action, right? And I say this often is, and I'm talking more so from addressing the awareness piece of Mine to Main Street, but from a way that shows somebody in action on the ground, that ties and bridges not just Mine to Main Street, but Main Street back to mines in the host communities that are basically, in most cases, for a lot of large scale mines, not reaping any benefits of the things that we're consuming. And so I think action is absolutely necessary. I will also say, being on the ground and not, just surveying or coming in and out and meeting with communities occasionally, being here on a full-time basis, it has been so eye-opening, because there are a lot of people that talk about doing action that you think are in action, especially NGOs and aid agencies. And then you start to really deep dive into it and you realize there is a massive discrepancy in their fund allocation and in truly addressing things in a very systemic way. And when you start asking questions about where $73 million are going because you see no projects on the ground, you very quickly start to realize it's inaction that is causing the discrepancy of fund allocation. And so I think action is the most necessary piece, and it's hard. It is really, really hard. And it takes something and a lot of commitment and a lot of measurement and a lot of conversation to keep action in existence for people.
So Scott, I might bore you by my analysis.
I doubt that. I'm pretty into this.
So I've got this thing about momentum. So for me, action, we need to be there needs to be momentum in a certain direction. If you think of momentum, momentum has got, if you look at mass times like acceleration. So there's a mass that you need to build, there's speed, and there's direction. That creates momentum. So what you need to understand is, do we have enough people? Do we have enough mass? Are we building mass in a certain direction? And are we running with the right speed? Because that's the momentum that we need to build in this. So for me, it's more than just action. It's actually building the momentum across a large enough mass of people to say, we are moving in the right direction and we're moving at the right speed to be able to deal with this. Because it's so important. Otherwise, it's like one individual action here and there. Absolutely great, and we see it. I think we were driving today, and we were driving from Kapwe to Ndola, and you drive through such extreme poverty, and it's like, where do you start? You feel like we're doing a bit, but there's just so much more that needs to be done. But if you then think of it, is take a step back and say, is the momentum in the right direction? Is the momentum at the right speed, and do we have the right mass behind us to be able to make the difference that we want? Because if you can measure it from those three angles, I think we can stand back and say, is this going to work or is it not?
So interesting. You didn't bore me for not even 1 second there. I was totally into it. So Brooke, you and I have known each other for 10 years. I think you're an incredibly interesting person. Everything from collegiate basketball player to Harvard to runways to winning pageants, working with kind of an A-list of celebrities. Where is the passion for mining? And now you're the CEO of Maker. I mean, obviously you love Ricus, so I get that part, but I think that's one of the things that makes you so interesting is you dive into everything head first and you immerse yourself in it and you become an expert very quickly. But where does that passion come from for what you're doing now?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. It's not something I talk about often, but one of my minors at university was Arabic. And out of university, I moved straight to the Middle East and started working at the World Bank. And I was a policy analyst, and I was looking at the correlation between economic development and national security. And Egypt is a very interesting place to do it. And I was there during the uprisings. And, I think I was quite young and immature and thought that I could change the world at that point in time. And I very quickly realized I needed mass and a little bit more acceleration to be able to do so. And, I took a step back. I was like, I felt disempowered. I felt like I was embarking on this thing that, what am I really going to do at all? So I moved back to the United States after 10 years of living in the Middle East. And it led me into consulting. And I always say, I don't know, I can never figure out how my life turned out the way that it did, because I was consulting with companies like the LSMs, like the Valets and the BHPs and the Resolution Copper. So I was working with mining executives, and more so from an executive development point of view. But that had me connect with Tony Robbins, and it had me connect with Leonardo DiCaprio and some of these A-list celebrities. But for me, at the source of it was always, how is it that I can take who you are and bring a soft message to what you're doing and connect you to the realities on the world. And sometimes that was super disempowering, because like not just A-list people, but anybody, you know, you've got really committed, incredible people that stand for something. And then you've got people that, pardon my French, are just full of shit. And you're like, goodness me, like, what am I doing here? And I think spending so much time with Ricus, it brought me back to that source, that root of like really wanting to make a profound difference in some space, merging an industry that I started working inside of and connecting it with the people that are consuming our products that we see on TV every single day. So it's a perfect marriage between the two. And as we all know, there is a massive learning curve and experience that is going to happen. And I'm learning something every day, even in the spaces that I had a lot of experience in.
What do you guys think about legacy? And if you do, you know, what are you hoping that it is?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think we talk about it often, you know, is it if and I for me, if it's working towards something that's bigger than who you are, and standing back, you know, it's not what I achieve, it's what the building blocks we put in place for the world to be a better place if we're not here anymore. And when I look at the mining industry is one of those, you know, I want to see the, you know, the world consume and also produce the metals it needs in a much more responsible way. And I want to see those people that have been left behind, the 90% of the world's mining workforce that's been left behind, being given a full go and given an opportunity to make a difference for themselves and their communities. So, and that's going to outlive who I am or who Brooke is, but at least I think we're putting the building blocks in place that can make that happen.
Yeah. And you know, for me, it's exactly the same. It's about making it matter. You know, I think that so many people have an important message to share and they never have the opportunity to share it because they either don't have a platform or they don't even know where to begin, or they've got all these stories and considerations about why their message doesn't matter. But for me, it's about giving people a platform to be able to show that their message matters. And that's not just A-list celebrities. It's not just the mining workforce or artisanal miners. It's the communities. It's, you know, the children that I posted a video, if you look on my LinkedIn today, that we provided water to a community for the first time ever. And you see a little boy at the end and he's crying. For me, that is the message that matters. And that's the legacy that I want to leave behind.
Is there a resource that we can go to? And I was just thinking of this because we have a friend in the Outlier Project, and one of our members, her name is Siavata Adare. Very interesting. So she was a trial lawyer for 20 years, but her passion was to be a chocolatier. She's now been rated the #1 chocolatier in the country and won all these crazy awards, James Beard semifinalist, etc. And, you know, by getting to know her, we know that cacao that is produced in West Africa is not really done the right way. And she doesn't buy cacao from West Africa. But if you don't know Vada Dare, like you're likely to be consuming a product that is tied to all kinds of atrocities. Is there a resource? Is there a website? Is there something you can go to access like who's doing a good job, who's not?
I mean, there's a lot of them, and it's, you know, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now because in some cases, I think unfortunately has become like a more of a pay to play to showcase your name on something.
Okay.
And I worked in
Yeah.
publishing, so I know that model all too well. But I will say on the jewelry side, the Responsible Jewelry Council has done a phenomenal job at listing out who are the jewelry retailers or designers that are sourcing from responsible places. You know, there is the Responsible Cobalt Alliance and Battery Alliance, also very similar. But that's where, again, we see a massive gap. So we're actually in the process of building out a database that allows you to see exactly where things come from and the regions that they come from. So we'll have to share that with you when it comes. But for now, I would say stick with those 3 databases because they're definitely the most legitimate.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. We've got a bunch of questions for you guys. You ready?
Yes, please.
All right. Yarrow in Florida, we're going to you first.
Ooh, Brooke and Ricus, thank you so much. This was, like Scott said, we don't know what we don't know, but having the opportunity for individuals like yourself to come talk to us about what you know and what you're passionate about and the impact that you're making is a tremendous blessing. So thank you for this time and for the work that you're doing. Continued blessings on that. I am so grateful for the information and perspective that you shared in balancing like transition from our consuming ways. I've got an environmental love bone in my body for sure, and have, like you shared, I guess earlier, my thought process on mining has been that it's bad. And I also, while I fully support our transition to different ways in the future and being more sustainable, I don't think that a cold turkey stop and start to something different is sustainable. So how you shared that there is a way to convert what we're doing to a new way of operating via more responsible resourcing was really insightful, and I think a more progressive and possible and sustainable way to do that. So thank you for that insight. I also have a chapter in my background of water quality and the global need for clean water and sanitation. I want to thank you for that aspect, that environmental aspect of your work that you're doing. I'm curious if you could share a little more about the community involvement that you have in regard to those essential needs, Brooke, you mentioned, as you offer opportunity for economic development, also the development for those basic needs in the communities.
Yeah, it's a very challenging thing to confront. I would run surveys often and baseline needs assessments, and you read them and it's like, oh, it moves you. But to be on the ground and really see it, and then to implement something and see the immediate, profound shift in something and really address something in a systemic way, but very quickly, is so powerful. And so for our approach, when we're working with the mining communities and host communities and even communities outside the mines, our first thing is looking at what are those basic systemic needs that they have. Water and sanitation definitely being one of them. And that is the first thing that we are addressing before anything else, but we're involving the community in it, because in a lot of these cases, the community does not know how to practice safely with sanitation or how to use water in an appropriate way. So there is the education element. And, when we think about, oh, well, it's just as easy as bringing in a toilet, not really. They have pit latrines, and it's not as easy as just bringing in a French drain, because one, the water is super scarce. And two, they have no idea how to use them. So we've been using compost toilets. That's what we're implementing here. And we're including the communities in the build of those compost toilets. So obviously starting in those primary places and in dense areas like schools and clinics, but including the community members in that. So we do community build days. They've been a part of building out the sanitation stations for the clinics and schools, so that it's not that you just get access to them at school or at the clinics. You can literally build your own compost toilet at home. You know how to do so in a very proper way. Once you address those systemic needs and people on the ground can see that there is a shift really in those basic needs that they have, and immediately, then you can start building in capacity, start building out infrastructure. But our first thing, Yara, is always addressing those basic needs, because they're the most immediate and can have the most profound impact in a very quick way.
That's so crazy.
Small things, because we, for example, one of the projects that Brooke just completed, we drill a borehole. So put a borehole down next to the school, put a solar pump in, put some tanks up, and provide taps, so that immediately provides running water for a school. It's the gutter and tank project. We put gutters and big rainwater tanks, so that when it rains, it catches the water. Again, they've got access to running water. And then just a couple of solar panels, inverter, and lights, because the schools don't have electricity. So at least, because some of the classes start at like 4:30 in the afternoon, so it gets dark, and kids are sitting in the dark, and then you can't really learn like that. So getting those really, really basic things in place, and we're talking about $10,000 to $20,000 investments to fix up a whole school. With all
there's
those
1,800 students and the parents, because that becomes a primary source for them to go and fetch water. So Yeah, and it requires ongoing education, right? And because it is very far behind. And so it's how is it that you can start educating youth so that the next generation, they are adapt to using sanitation and water, where this generation currently is not.
Do you guys team up with nonprofits? It seems like, man, you're taking on so much stuff that typically you would think there's a nonprofit that maybe is there to lend a helping hand.
We do. And that has been, I think, one of the things that we've had the greatest challenge with, because for us, it's really important. I don't know if you're familiar with the nonprofit model or aid model, but conversion is a big thing. So if I'm donating $1, how much of that dollar is actually going into the project that I'm donating to? And honestly, the numbers are really, really low when you start looking at it. If you're lucky, you're going to see a 70% conversion. And so we really are looking at spiking that up to 90%. So when we're working with somebody, we're very selective to ensure that it aligns with our values and that, somebody's investment is truly going almost in its entirety into the community.
So Scott, just to put it in context, so this corridor from Cobway to the mine that we're building is like a 50-kilometer corridor. Brooke did the survey. 100% of people have zero access to running water, and more than 95% of people don't have access to formal sanitation. And we've had World Bank, USA, all these people spending hundreds of millions of dollars in that region, but that's what you still have on the ground. So I think that's the challenge we have, is that model really does not work. And it's not like people are bad. They're trying hard, but it's the model and the implementation is not working.
I could tell it when I asked the question and you looked at each other and smiled. I was like, okay, I think there's a problem.
Because it's so funny, because what happened last week, so Brooke had this call with, let's not say who it was, but it was one of the big aid agencies, and they said, yeah, please, we'll want to talk to you. You had a call back from them at the beginning of the week or end of last week?
I was supposed to meet with them on Tuesday, today actually, and I got a call and they said no, but we've already allocated all of our spend. And so when I made reference of $73 million that was opened up last week and then it got allocated in 5 days, I mean, that just shows you the expenditure. So that being said, there's also some amazing NGOs. So we do have a short list of NGOs that we are working with and partnering with. At the end of the day, I think funding is always the biggest challenge, right? And so we're looking to merge public sector, private sector, civic society in the most thoughtful possible manner to address things very intentionally. So sometimes it's truly just a partnership with, like what Ricky said, Jubilee, who we're working with now. In other cases, it's, working with the Habitat for Humanity to rebuild housing. But we just want to ensure that whoever we're working with, you're looking at almost full conversion on the dollar.
Paul in Florida, you're up.
Oh my goodness. Brooke and Ricus, thank you so much for your time. Brooke, I've been following a lot of your humanitarian stuff on LinkedIn, so it's cool that we finally get to chat. And thank you both so much for coming back. My question is really about this idea of reverse culture shock. So I think when you were supposed to come back the first time, it was right before we went to Nicaragua in February. And I remember for me, that experience was so life-changing because you got to kind of see a different perspective. And I know for all of us that went, like, we had new levels of gratitude and humility. Kind of like a personal question for me. So in February of next year, with a mastermind that I'm a part of, we're going on a retreat to Thailand. But my mentor is like very much, I mean, for lack of a better word, like bougie. She likes staying at all these nice places and fancy materialistic things. But for me, I'm kind of conflicted because when I look at like Thailand and the fact that it's a developing nation, to me, from like a ethical and a moral perspective, it just seems irresponsible to go to a place like that and not give back. I'm kind of wondering, like, have you guys had any experience of like going to retreats in those places, and like, what are some ideas and things that you would suggest, or really just finding this harmony of, yes, like you can experience nice things in places that are kind of developing, but just not losing yourself, I guess, if that makes sense.
Paul, I love your question. We talk about this
Yeah.
all the time, and
Actually
actually,
spoke about it today in the
yeah,
car.
we were talking about it today in the car. Again, looking around and just saying, gosh, you know that there's these beautiful game lodges that are just a couple hours away. And I mean, truly, like some of them 6-star. And then you look around, you're like, where is that money going? And oftentimes a lot of these luxury hotel groups are not actually based in that region. That's just one of the hotels that they have. So a lot of the money ends up going offshore. On the other side of this, what I can say is, and I've dealt with this, and Ricus can tell you, and I've even posted about it, is I'm somebody that I do like nice things as well. I mean, I'm literally wearing a Jimmy Choo sweatshirt right here. And I've often been conflicted with, gosh, I feel terrible enjoying nice things, liking nice things, enjoying a good life, and then seeing the suffering that exists around me. Number one, I will say, and I've learned this being on the ground in a full-time capacity, is we see it as suffering. A lot of people don't see it as suffering. That is their environment, that's their circumstance. They don't know anything else. So to immerse yourself in that, to understand and just relate with them is entirely sufficient. You know, I think that it's always good to question, does this hotel have any corporate social responsibility initiatives? Do they have any social impact that they're doing? Are there any, you know, ecotourism activities that I can partake in that I know I'm going to understand the community and get back into the community? I think that is a great way to immerse yourself without feeling bad about where you're staying, because it can be a culture shock. I think the number one most important thing is just immersing yourself and educating yourself, but it doesn't mean, Paul, that you need to go and stay in where the communities are living. You know, I give a lot of credit to people that do that. I think it says a lot. Ricus is somebody that does that. I'll be honest with you, when I had to use a pit latrine for the first time, I truly did not eat for like a couple of days. And it sounds very petty, but it's something that culturally we're just not used to. And so I think just asking the questions, seeing what there is that you can do to get involved in different community social impact initiatives is perfectly sufficient until you're in a place that you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to actually go and immerse myself in its full capacity in that space.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
I think your willingness, even what you're saying, says so much about you as a person. And I think your willingness to go out and just listen to and give your time to people in the community would mean the world, absolutely the world to people. And the interesting thing is, and Brooke pointed to this, we think of it as suffering, but it's in their world, that's their world. And they just make the best out of every day. And the thing that I've seen, and Brooke can also support this, you know, we tend to, from a first world, come from a world of scarcity, you know, so it's like we never have enough, you know, so we always try and gather until one day we'll have enough, and then you give something away. The most amazing thing in these communities is that those people live in a world of abundance. So when I look at them, you think, oh, geez, they don't have anything. But the thing is, they've got everything. And you go to them, and Brooke saw this last week as well. She went to a community. They don't have like a fridge full of food. They've got a small bowl that's in the house, and that's the food they have for the day. When you go there, they will share their food that they have with you, not expecting you to pay for it. But there's this abundance, this sense of tomorrow will look after itself. But my job is to look after you right now. And that sense of abundance is what you see in these communities. You see the kids, they've got barely, you know, they don't have shoes, they've got little broken, you know, shorts full of holes and skirts full of holes, but they laugh and they're happy and they just so glad to see you. And if you spend time with them and they can touch your hair, or like my daughter, they love touching
She's 7, so they love pulling her eyelashes. And when we were drilling the hole, we were like, they were so excited for the water. And then one little girl came up to Layla, our daughter, and she said to her, water, I don't need it, but I want your soft hair. And that's their world, you know?
Yeah, so there's this sense of abundance, and I think it's something that we miss in the first world. And it's not just you going to spend time with them. Your time spent with them will be you giving abundantly to them as a community, and they would love it. And that's all you need to do.
Yeah, that was powerful. I guess a kind of quick follow-up, Brooke and Ricus. So like, are you saying that the best way to really deal with this reverse culture shock thing is just to kind of like remove yourself from the equation and kind of just listen and just be present in that experience, and not necessarily like leave it there, but like I guess what I'm kind of getting in many ways is to say something that reverse culture shock is kind of selfish. Like we're looking at it from our perspective versus looking at it from their perspective. So this was awesome.
Yeah. And I think to that point too is, and I've seen it is, especially, studying policy and being a Westerner, there are so many things that I was like, I know exactly what's needed. We know the solutions. I went to school, I studied this, I've looked at all these case studies. We've seen this project work and that project work. That has been, I think, the biggest pitfall, right? Is because you come in with a lot of great ideas that have been very effective, but the context and the environment and the nation and the values and different religions and, social perspectives, they're so different. And so to go in without any filter, any conditioning at all is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And it's hard, but I think just being present in its entirety will allow you to remove all those filters.
So amazing because the happiest kids I've ever seen in my life were in Nicaragua, and they had nothing, literally nothing, a soccer ball, and that was it. But the happiest kids I've ever seen. So it's so true. Amy Van Kuren, you have a question.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. So I guess my question is, when you're going into these environments, right, it's almost like a sense of childhood wonder. Like you were stating, Brooke, you can't go in and be like, here's all the solutions. How do you start approaching the people in these communities so that way they felt involved in the decision-making process, or if it's something that they're actually wanting to see value in without, saying, hey, I know this will work better?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted approach. I think research, data collection is obviously so important. So it's something that we do at the forefront, but it just informs something. So it informs potentially what could be so, but it's not necessarily what's so. Once we have that, we go into the communities with locals. So you need to find people that are in the communities that speak the language, that are very relatable for those community members, and start creating conversation and listening. So we put together surveys, but they're very light. We have questions that we're working off of, but for them, they're just being asked, they're talking, they're in conversation, they're able to share their worlds with other community members who are our partners in the process. Once we have collected that information, we start running focus groups. So again, now you get not just an individual perspective, but you get a group perspective on what's happening. But this is all being facilitated at a high level by us, but on the ground, it's being done by our local partners, because that is so important from a relatability point of view. Once we've collected that, Amy, we then we work with the community leaders, civic leaders, teachers, traditional leaders. So they're like the chiefs of those communities. And we sit down and we share our findings, and that creates a relatability. But we also offer how is it that we can work together, as opposed to we're going to do this for you and you're going to just sit and wait for things to happen, or we're going to tell you you're going to do something. And as many have seen, nothing happens. So we create a future with those civic leaders and with the traditional leaders of what the future of that community looks like based on the findings that we have found and based on the needs that they have. And what it does is it creates an active participation from all different levels of leadership inside the community, and they become a partner. They hold themselves accountable for what's being happened, and you can count on them to show up to do builds with you, because it doesn't do any good in the long term. It's not sustainable at all if we're going to do something, put it in place, and then walk away. So you need to develop the community to be active participants in all programming, and that's really the way that we set it up.
But also maybe, Amy, just one point, and Brooke can expand on that. Is quite funny what happened last week or two weeks ago. The one key thing is to understand the traditions of the community that you're walking into as well. So, for example, this community that we go into, what you've got to do is you've got to offer gifts. And the way that the community will then show that they accept you and accept you being there is accepting your gift. So you physically have to take the gift to them in front of the traditional headman or the leader of the community, put it in front of them. If they accept it, then you're accepted into the community. And I'm not talking about, these are small gifts, it's like
Chickens and
a live chicken, it's a a bag of meal and it's some sugar and a pillow. So these are things you put in front of them, but you show the respect of understanding their tradition, and therefore, and then they will then include you into that community. If you just come in there and you think you're going to do it this way, just rock up and start talking to people, you miss a big opportunity.
I
And
love
one
Uh,
that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Brooke.
No, I was going to say just a quick share to that too, because what, you you learn in the process. So we knew that that was part of the process, but we're very intentional about including our children in some of the things that we're doing. We think it's really important to have them be children of the world from a young age. So we had our oldest daughter who's 10 at that traditional meeting, and she was listening in, and we have a farm in Australia. So we love chickens, and they have become more like pets than anything. We don't slaughter the chickens, like we love them. And chickens here obviously serve a very different purpose because it feeds people. So they pull out this chicken now. You'd expect it to look like a chicken, but it was already depulucked and legs tied together and it was flapping around. And we now have a daughter that refuses to eat chicken. So those things happen. And it's just the realities. It is, nobody's perfect. And I say as if I know what I'm doing, but 90% of the time I tell Ricus, I don't. And I'm learning during the way. And I think that's the most beautiful thing, is to just keep that learner mindset, because it's the only way that we can grow and we can adapt in the different communities that we're working inside of.
I've got another question. I think when we face massive issues, poverty, climate change, the things that you face every day, we have a tendency to either get overwhelmed and we get just paralyzed and do nothing, or we throw up our hands and just, can't feel like we can't do anything. How do you guys do what you do every single day? Is it kind of like that, old saying, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. I mean, how do you guys not succumb to that feeling of being overwhelmed and paralyzed?
Well, I think having a partner to be able to lean on makes a big difference. For us, Ricus is my accountability partner. He is somebody that, at the end of the day, when I need to debrief, he listens, he coaches me, we create together. I'll be honest, for myself, I don't know if I would be able to do it without having that and without having him by my side, because it is a very big thing that you take on, and it requires ongoing action and commitment and partnership to build. So, it's hard. I've had plenty of breakdowns where sometimes you feel like you've hit a wall, and that's why that accountability partner is so important. And it doesn't have to be your partner in life. It can be a friend, it can be a colleague, but having that person that when you do hit that wall and when you feel like there's nothing but a stop and disruption and failure ahead of you, that person lifts you back up and they keep you on track. And so that for me has been the biggest asset in it.
No, I totally agree. And absolutely. And the thing is, Demiana knows that we've had for, the ability to go and make a difference somewhere. And a lot of times people didn't want that to happen. You just have to stand up again, and sometimes it is as little as just going back home and just, cry to the person next to you, and you can just then move on again. You just sometimes need to let out the emotion and, dust it off and get up and move on, because, so why not? So what are you going to do? You're going to say stuff it after the third no or the fourth no or the fifth one? Or you're just going to stand up and keep on doing it, because if we're not doing it, who's going to do it? So it's important to stand up.
I love that mindset. This hour has absolutely flown by. So as a community, of 700 plus people in dozens of countries, how can we help support you guys?
I would say always just question where things are coming from, because I think it's important, not just your electronics or your car, your jewelry, but the clothes that you're buying and the food that you're eating. Just question where things come from, and just remember that there's likely a human life out there that it's coming from. And I would say the other thing is, I would love for people to keep following our journey. We are doing some amazing things and building incredible platforms, and we've had lots of momentum, and I sometimes feel like our heads being torn in a million different directions on what we're building, but if you want to be able to support what we're doing, just follow along and reach out and say hello and have a conversation, because I love, and Ricus loves, just knowing that's what we're doing out there. Somebody hears it. It's such a special thing. So the biggest thing that you could do is say hello and let us know that you're there.
Totally agree.
Love it. Love it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I know you probably got lots and lots to do, so I appreciate the fact that you carved out an hour for us to educate us. It was fascinating.
No, thank you, Scott, and everyone. And Kathy, we appreciate your time and listening, and also being so flexible since we couldn't get the last one to work out. So we really appreciate everybody here, and looking forward to staying connected with everyone.
Thank you so much, Scott, and everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ricus. Thanks, Brooke.
Thanks.